Hi, welcome back to a brand new video of the Targeted Individual Program, Targeted Individual Experience. What you are about to watch comes from the YouTube channel, African Diaspora News Channel. And the one thing that I talk about how Negropeans will become involved in the coercive persuasion programming and cognitive warfare against themselves and each other. And they are um, manipulating themselves also, as well as being manipulated because they are deluded in their belief system, right? In this whole concept of, particularly when you see them driving around talking about uh, love all humanity and out of many, one, all this nonsense because it sounds good and it's what white people have conditioned them to say, despite the contradictory evidence of what white people truly believe and other ethnic groups of people who are placed above us in the socioeconomic ladder, in the systemic socio environment in which black people are regulated into being, regardless of the policies, the business opportunities, the housing, the environmental warfare, the education system for black people across the globe, right? Particularly within the West and within Africa, it is done by one group of people or two groups of people, usually black, usually whites and Arabs, right? Who have created a system in which to keep black people, no matter if they call themselves Christians or Muslims or what have you, regardless of their religious faith, Islam or Christianity, Judaism, it makes no difference, right? So Negropeans will are the only ones that are saying that. When I look at videos of, you have Jewish rabbis, Hasidic Jewish rabbis talking about their Israelis, I should say, talking about they are building a new world and black people are excluded from this. How is it that you can go around talking about out of many one? Hmm? How is it you can go around with bumper stickers talking about, you know, uh, 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 God's love and we are all one people? Hmm? That delusional sort of mindset is why we continue to be at the bottom, is why we continue to be at the mercy of other groups of people who we depend on for everything, because we are not in a system that promotes uh, true black power and true black upliftment. And black power does not mean the being against other groups of people. It just means that black people are economically supporting each other. That in a majority of communities where black people live, that black people also own uh, a good portion of the businesses. Okay, not to say that we have to run all the business in our community has to be black owned, but a good portion, right? And that black people also are not locked out of the the production system, the supply system, right, for the things that we need, the things that we want. All right. But this video is for the Nigerians who love to, when I talk about how they would rather sit in churches with white supremacists, right? Because they believe in the same because they claim to believe in the same Jesus and the same God, but obviously, they see the racism within the church, but they don't call it out. They still attend these churches, and it shows you who the weak-minded people are, right? Because see, they will tell us who don't believe in their religion that we're weak minded because we hate God. First of all, we don't hate God because your God never exists, and if your God existed, then your God hates you. That is what you should understand. Just look at your predicament. All right, I'm not talking about the few nigga prince who, because they're doing well, they think that they're highly blessed. Because if you are God's people, God will do things and assure you that you are his people by uplifting you, right? Not keeping you at the bottom. But I want you to listen to this because this is important. Like I said, I always say, and I say this, they'll say that we who are conscious or we full of hate and this and that. Okay, remember we're trying to educate you guys on the reality and the truth, right? Listen to this.
Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Now let's play. Let, yeah. Look, sister, I get it. Yeah, it's all that feminist. Yeah, I don't do well with feminism. I really don't. I don't. I really don't do well with feminism. But let's get to this Christian nationalist real quick, because I know we got a certain time period to be here, and let's cue him up.
But even let's say that somebody was coming into our church and they're black, and would they be eligible for membership in our church? Yes, they of course they would. They'd be eligible for membership in our church. And
Now, why would they be eligible for membership in your church? Right? Because they tied, right? So they'll take your money, they'll sit next to you, right? You know what I'm saying? But they're not gonna mix with you. They're not gonna tell their sons and their daughters, "Oh, that's a well mannered man, black man, or black woman." You know, let once you go introduce yourself. They're not doing that. They don't even want black men and black women approaching their daughters, right? Well, I shouldn't say they won't let black men approach their daughters, but they will let their sons approach black women, right, to sleep with them, but not to marry them, because they'll tell them that if you marry anybody black, you won't get no inheritance. All right. See, these people are truth in their belief when it comes to certain aspects of the Bible. We who claim to be Christians as black people, we don't believe nothing that Bible says, even though we claim to believe it, because our actions don't show it. I don't listen to what you say. I see what you do, so I understand and I know what it is that you do, and I understand what it is that you do. I don't believe. I know.
but would they be permitted to participate in, embody, and practice what I would call black culture generally in our church? The answer is absolutely.
Now, look at what he says, right? Listen to what he says. Black culture, right? So, what is black culture to him? What is, in his mind, what is black culture to him?
Not. Why? Because the characteristics that mark black culture as a generalization, in the same way Paul's talking about Cretans on Crete, they are evil, murderous, violent, bestial people. They steal, they kill, they destroy, they look like Satan. Your Facebook login might be in the hands of a scammer as we
Okay, I want to pause this because you know what? Let me
speak. Here's how to check. I ran a quick scam. They kill, they destroy, they look like Satan.
So again, these are your so-called white Christians, evangelical Christians, right? And the people, where do they get this thing about black people looking like Satan? Right? If black people look like Satan, why do Hollywood show Satan as being white men? Right? Why does if you look at, you go watch the movie, what, the Devil Wear Prada, you look at other films that has the devil in it, and it's always a white man though, right? But I want you guys to understand this. So when I tell you you should go and read certain religious books, right, or books that are based on the religious ideology, particularly Christianity and Judaism, go read the book of Adam and Eve. There's book 1 and book 2. Go, in book 2, when God asked Satan to reveal who he truly is, Satan revealed himself as a black woman. That's who he truly is, right? Then the tempter of Eve, right? In this book, there's illustration that shows the beast of the Garden of Eden that is a black woman. All right. So why do they show black women as being the devil and Satan? Why? That is, I'm not, this is, that would be a long video for me to explain. Okay. But I just give you a hint because of our if you're a black person, it is because of our African ancestors, the very first people on this planet, created on this planet, evolve on this planet, all black people. Okay. But it was the black woman who created life in her womb, right? Who brought you, who, when you were in darkness, who brought you into the light of the world. So the black woman herself represents Christ, but the black man also represents Christ, right? Because we are an intricate part of the creation process. Though life is created within the woman, our sperm is what sets off that reaction, that chain reaction, like the Big Bang, right? There was an explosion, and life began to form. So you gotta have that esoteric knowledge in order to understand certain things. Even the Bible that you're reading, you gotta have an esoteric. If you're only reading the Bible and you're being taught to take it literally, then you're being misled, and that's the majority of believers. They are being misled. Then the fact that he said that black people are, what he says, dirty. They're what they commit a lot of murder. Again, let's look at the reality. Black people taught white people how to bait. So who's dirty? The vast majority of murder in the United States are not done by black people, but are done by white people. Okay? So when I talk about the white supremacists and their hatred towards black people, and they're in the churches preaching this stuff. And a lot of your black pastors in these mega churches, the people who have funded them, the people who were, you look at the seminary school they come out of, right? And there was I forgot the name of the person. There's a podcast, and he was I think he's an ex-pastor. He talks about how, that these pastors, right, are being ruled by the white religious institutions. Okay. But again, that's hate. That is hate. And this man calls himself a Christian, right? But y'all will look past all of this and go sit in this motherfucking church with the rest of his white supremacist members, all right, while knowing that of what they think of us. All right. Now, this is what I'm talking about. So you know me already. I love to teach. Let's look at the history of white people. And I'm just gonna. This is from the book called Dirt. Okay. I have the Kindle version of it, and let's see what it says about how white people were living in Europe. Give me a sec. All right, so this is the title of the book. It's called Dirt, A Social History as Seen Through the Use and Abuse of Dirt. Terry P. McLaughlin. All right. Again, this is a historical book based on historical facts. Okay. Now let's look at certain things in which where was I had bookmarked. Where's my bookmarks here? All right, there you go. Bookmark this. So let's start from this, right? And let's start from where. Let's go back here. And let's talk about the church, right? After Rome was expelled from out of North Africa by the Arabs, right? So it tells you, it says, cleanliness and urbanity go together. The Romans were clean mainly because They set great value on public and collective life. If a man is going to spend most of his time talking, debating, working in close proximity with other people, he can do so with more grace and less distraction if the smell and appearance of his face and body do not offend his neighbors. This same urbanity and interest in social life was anathema to the rising cult of the Christians, right? Who were firmly convinced that the things of this world were vanities, and they tend to reject all the other Roman values, including cleanliness, along with their theological ones. They seriously renounced the business and the pleasure of the age, adjured the use of wine, of flesh, and of marriage, chastised their body, modified their affliction, and embraced a life of misery as the price of eternal happiness, remarks Gibson, picking over the wretched habit of the early Christian with a formidable scalpel of his poise. It was the practice of the monks either to cut or shave their hair. They wrapped their heads in a cowl to escape the sight of profane objects. Their legs and feet were naked except in the extreme cold of winter, and their slow and feeble steps were supported by a long staff. The aspect of a genuine anchoret was horrid and disgusting. Every sensation that is offensive to man was thought acceptable to God, and the angelic rule of Theogony condemned the solitary custom of bathing the limbs in water and the anointing and of anointing them with oil. All right, Athanasius, in his life of Antony of Thebais, an illiterate youth who became founder of one of Anchoret sects, remarks the approval that Antony had a holy horror of clean water, and his feet in particular were never contaminated by it, except by accident. St. Benedict, one of the greatest administrators of the early church, pronounced solemnly that to those that are well, and especially to the young, bathing shall seldom be permitted. And his followers accepted the prohibition with great zeal. St. Agnes was never washed throughout her lifetime. The fact that the lifetime was only 13 years may have had some connection to this. And a 4th century pilgrim to Jerusalem boasted that she had not washed her face for 18 years so that not to disturb the holy water used in her baptism. St. Jerome criticized some of his followers for keeping too clean. Many of the ascetic went further than simply neglect of their own bodies and sought out lepers, sufferers from ulcers, and other people with the more disgusting and dirty disease, so as to give the ascetic the chance to wash ulcered feet with his own hair, in the style of Saint Mary Magdalene, to kiss lepers or altered skin, and generally wallow in the perverse delight of cryptophilia. It is a pity that they did not try, while giving themselves such strange enjoyment, to use any practical means of relieving the suffering of the patient. St. Hugh of Lincoln used to gather together a great assembly of male lepers and then kiss them, reserving his fondness and closest embrace for those who are most deformed, and taking care to kiss the actual ulcers on their skin. Dr. Crichton, a 19th century medical historian who quoted this odd habit, adds that St. Hugh's practice must have come as a not altogether agreeable surprise to men who already had sufficient physical discomfort to contend with. Queen Matilda, according to Dr. Creighton, surprised her brother David by her unusual devotion. When he was serving as a youth at the English court, one evening he was with his companions in the lodgings. When the queen called him to her chamber, he found the place filled with lepers, and the queen standing in the midst with her robe laid aside and a towel girdle around her. Having filled a basin with water, she proceeded to wash the feet of the lepers and to wipe them with the towel. And then, taking them in both her arms, she kissed them with devotion. To whom her brother, "What dost thou, my lady, uh, critiques, if the king were to know this, never would he deign to kiss with his lip the mouth of thine polluted with the soil of lepers' feet." But she answered with a smile, "Who does not know that the feet of an eternal king ought to be preferred to the lips of a mortal king? See then, dearest brother, wherefore I have called thee, that thou mayest learn by my example to do so also." I mean, that is literally. But again, this, when Europeans, particularly white Americans, have been lied about their history, they, you know, again, when you go look at the Moors in southern Europe, how clean Spain was, people bathed regularly, they had the highest literacy rate. The black Moors built the first universities in Europe. And then you contrast that during that same period with France and England, it was the total opposite. They lived in filth. The religion, the Christian religion, in which the Catholic Church had spent 1,000 years keeping Europe in darkness, right? Particularly France, England, and where you had a lot of the plagues, the black plagues, and all these other plagues that we hear about, right? But because Hollywood give us a skewed image of what life was like for Londoners, for people in England, people in France during that period, it's a lie. It's a lie. They know the truth, right? You see, the people who truly, the white supremacists who truly know their history, they hate black people because they know who we are. They know who we are, and they know who they are. They know that they're the descendants of people who were severely mentally ill. That mental illness is hereditary, and that was brought on by the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? So, again, when they talk about how great they are, they're not. Okay? Now, let's continue. It says, "It does not appear that David profited by the lesson. Leprosy had come from Egypt from the Roman soldiers. A more, and again, it's by it came from Egypt by the Roman soldiers, not the Egyptians. If you go and you read the Bible, and when they talk about a leper, right, in the Bible, with Moses, Sarah, where God turned not Sarah, sorry, Abraham and Sarah, and God turned Sarah into a leper. And what did she say? Right? That what did Abraham said when he asked God to turn his wife back? He said that she God turned into leap and she became white as snow. Okay, and and leprosy is because of what she had. What she had a disease of the skin, right? Not she had, but leprosy is a disease of the skin, right? So it's the Romans because of their filthy habit, the soldiers. All right. So it says a more permanent prize that clear than Cleopatra. It appears as a skin complaint in which all pat. You gotta go through all that. Okay, you guys can read. Go get the book and read it. Okay. Um, let's just give you the history of that. I want to talk about. Yeah. All right. There were at one time nearly 300 in England and 2,000 in France, thrown up in the atmosphere of religious mania. These were often tended by friars and other religious men trained in the best tradition of St. Benedict's, so they were by no means the hygienic places that the word hospital suggests today, but rather in sanitaries, a hole suitable for the poor to die in. Monasteries were also endowed richly, but were very little more clean. Fresh straws for the mattresses were provided once a year, water for bath 2, 3, or 4 times a year. It says an 11th century chronicler. Many had drains of the sort, and often there were tunnels which served 2 or more buildings. Hence, the tunnel which, to the delight of the anti-clerical or romantically minded, seemed to connect monasteries with nearby nurseries. Is it no nunneries? Right. Obviously, access uh, would be had from one to the other through the sewer, but it would have taken quite a lot of the amorous charm out of the situation. In an excavation in St. Albans, A.J. Lamb writes, here was founded a deep pit, 18 feet 8 inches long by 5 feet 3 inches wide. The walls were 15 inches thick. The depth of the pit below the uh, cluster floor level was 25 feet. At the bottom were found pieces of pottery and fragments of coarse cloth, which it is thought were old gowns worn up by the monks and used as toilet paper. Evidence, too, that the monks suffered from digestive trouble, which were by no means rare in those days, was proved by the finding in the pit seed of the buckthorn, a powerful aperient. Such an elaborate privy was unusual. In fact, the abbot who built this necessary house referred to it with pride. None can be found more beautiful or more sumptuous. Most of the monks still retain the habit of and outlook of Gibbon's Anaxagoras and were contemporaries of cleanliness. Their robes were issued so rarely in most monasteries that they cannot often have been old ones to use as toilet paper. Again, uh, um, as toilet paper as at St. Albans, and they lived at and slept in them. The order of sanctuary must have been somewhat overpowering. The Roman bath fell down, and the Christian abbeys and churches rose up. The spiritual gain may have been there, but there was an apocalypse to come. So anyway, if you keep reading, get this book, keep reading it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So again, when these people want to talk about being, with particularly black people, and black people are filthy, and they are trying to turn us into who they were, out of jealousy, out of anger, out of hatred. And like I said, when you look at black people today, particularly black women, they are conditioning black women to be who they say they are. This is how they've been conditioning black men to be who they say we are. Okay? So, when you talk about hate, hate is when a group of people who are in position of power will commit some of the worst crime against another group of people simply because they are trying to steal their history and erase us, because we are the truth. We are the truth to their lies. All right? Talk to you guys in the next video.